All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. We're here live on our Twitch and YouTube stream right now, and we're pulling up some videos submitted by our viewers. If you want to come by and check this out for your chance to be selected for Form Check Friday, come on by the live stream and send them in. So as per usual, we're going to start off with who we left off with last time, and this is Darren. So let's get to it. Darren is pulling 127.5 for 5 here at what he said was an 8 RPE. Darren's been training for about 6 months. He's 3 weeks into powerlifting training, and he says he's experiencing a little bit of low back and mid back soreness and discomfort. So he's wondering if backgrounding is an issue. He says he's heard things kind of on both ends of the spectrum in terms of whether or not he should be worried about that. So the first thing I'm noticing here, Darren, is that our start position is just a little bit inconsistent, right? We're seeing the backgrounding, sure, but with the hips being at a slightly different position from time to time, I think that's probably what's impacting how much soreness you're feeling. The other thing is, I would specifically mention that feeling some soreness and discomfort in your low back and mid back is totally normal, is totally fine. You know, there are muscles there, we're working them. And just like if your quads were sore after a squat workout, you know, your erectors being sore doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. It just means those muscles are being stressed. Maybe they're being stressed in a way that they haven't before. If you're only 3 weeks into a powerlifting program, it's not uncommon to have a little bit of extra soreness. What I would say is that these first few reps are executed a little bit better in terms of actually pulling your hips down into a decent position. But one of the things I'm seeing in most of these reps is that we're a little forward over the bar. So when you pull yourself down into position here, one of the things that I would try to achieve is to get these shoulder blades down a little. I would allow the knees to come forward slightly more and get the shoulder blades like you're trying to pull them down into your side pockets. I think by doing that, you're going to create a little bit better stiffness and a little better bracing throughout your back, and really make sure that as you initiate the pull, so this rep 2 is a good example, right? You pull down and then we're getting a good push off the floor, right? It looks like we're doing a lot of the work with the legs here. We're pushing the floor away. Some of these other reps look like we're starting a lot higher, and the first thing that moves is the trunk. We're really trying to like pull back through the bar. And I think that is maybe why we're getting a little bit of extra work for the mid and low back. So I'm going to say work on trying to make things more like your first couple of reps here. Don't worry if your back gets a little sore. That's normal. It's nothing to be worried about or scared of, but try to make sure that you're really feeling the push of pushing the floor away as opposed to kind of like pulling back on the bar. Now we're going to get into some live ones here. Our next viewer who submitted a video here is Mike, and Mike has been using the Calgary Barbell app for quite some time now. He's made a whole bunch of gains on it. Imagine that. And he mentioned here that he's losing a bit of tightness in his squat, feels like he's getting pitched forward on the first rep of his squat sets lately. So let's take a look specifically at this first rep and see if we can figure out what might be different from first rep to the rest of them. So let's take a look. I'm not sure I see you getting pitched forward there, Mike. I think this might be a case of one of those things where we feel things moving, we feel things getting a little more out of position than it appears. So let's watch this one more time and see if I can figure out exactly what you're talking about, because it's likely there is some sort of small movement, perhaps in the upper back a little. If anything, I'm noticing that we're maybe sitting a little deeper. We're getting to the point where the torso is slightly more upright in the bottom, and we might be losing just a little bit of tightness. Whereas I think from rep 2, we've got the torso angle a little more set and it's a little less moving throughout. So it might be just in trying to recreate how you're initiating reps 2 onward. It looks like, especially this rep, we had really, really good tightness into the bottom. And on rep 1, I think we kind of bottomed out. We maybe lost a little bit of position in terms of sitting back maybe a bit too much, maybe not allowing enough weight to remain on the forefoot and the front of the foot as we hit the bottom. I would say overall though, man, these squats look fantastic. I think your depth is good. Your positioning is good. They're wonderfully consistent. Your back position is really good. Let me look at one more thing here. We're looking, Yeah, okay, so we're looking the same direction throughout. That was one thing that I thought might change as the set went on, was that maybe we were looking in slightly different places, and that's sort of why it felt like we were getting thrown around. But honestly, I think we might just be kind of overanalyzing here. And I think your squat overall looks fantastic, man. Fantastic. Literally keep doing what you're doing because it's working. All right, next up here is Gerard. Now, Gerard, apparently right towards the end of his training block, decided that he was going to switch to sumo. And with that change, sounds like it brought him a lot of success. He said he added 40 kilos to his E1RM by switching to sumo in one of the last weeks of his block. So by switching to sumo, he said he added 40 kilos and he's looking for any major mistakes. So he said he watched a lot of our videos and his coach gave him some good advice in terms of how to pick up sumo. So let's take a look and see what we can see here. The first thing I noticed is that we do have a pretty rounded sumo position. I think in a lot of cases, I recommend lifters get a little bit more extension. Now, I'm not necessarily going to jump right to that, but I do think that we could probably get away with a bit of a narrower stance here. If we look at this lift from the front, we're going to see this kind of an angle from your foot to your knee. And a lot of the times we can be a little more sturdy. We can transfer force a little bit better if we're more straight up and down in the shin angle when looking at it from the front. So I think the first thing I'm seeing there is, yeah, maybe a little more straight up and down. So a narrower stance, or cueing the knees out a little bit wider, but it doesn't look like the knees out thing is going to be super useful or comfortable at all. So I would bring the stance in a little bit. If you can, try to get a little bit more extension, try to pull those shoulder blades down and get that good depression there. But overall, I think a really good, smooth, solid pull. Anytime you can add 40 kilos to your anytime you can add 40 kilos to your E1RM, I mean, you're having a good day. You're obviously doing something right. So slightly narrower stance would probably be the one thing I would nitpick there. And our next lifter here is Alessandro. Now, Alessandro has told us that he believes his squat is his strongest lift, but he says it looks the worst technique-wise. This is 162.5, or sorry, his E1RM is 162.5. This is 132.5 for a triple. He also mentioned he has no experience with maxing or high intensities, but is planning to compete in January. So that's coming up pretty quick. Let's see if we can help you get dialed in. The first thing I'm noticing here is as you descend, number one, you're looking straight down. I would maybe look a little out so your head's a little more in line with your trunk. The other thing I'm seeing is that as you descend, we're mostly just going knees forward and trying to keep very upright. Now that's a pretty common thing to see with lifters when they're more or less starting out, when they're a little newer. You said you've never maxed out yet, so I'm assuming you're a little younger in your training age. And I think what happens is people try to stay upright. They have this concept or this idea that being upright is better. The more upright you can be, the better. And while that might be the case for certain lifters with very specific leverages, often we have to lean over a little more than we might think. So I think that by initiating this hip back a little more as we descend, I think that's going to help with some things in terms of maintaining better balance on the foot. The other thing that I'm seeing here is a pretty wide stance. I would potentially narrow the stance or just bring that toe angle in a little bit. It looks like we're really toed out. And then when we hit the bottom, the knees come in. And one of the reasons, or I think the biggest reason that the knees come in my opinion, is that you try leaning forward, but you lose stability. So what I would say is it's less about leaning forward and more about pushing the hips back, right? And it's very slight. It doesn't need to be a big change. It doesn't need to be a big lean. It's basically just getting here with the torso, but earlier, right? So we're keeping some weight on the heels. We're pushing the hips back slightly. We're setting the torso angle, and then we're just descending straight down. So it's not that we're leaning more. We're just leaning a little earlier. The other thing I'm seeing is that it looks like you're really trying to push your knees out quite a bit. And I think with the wide stance, with the big toed out angle and trying to push the knees out, watch what happens every time we hit the bottom. The knees come in significantly. And then again, we're ending up with that sort of inward angle. If we were to look at this from the front, this is exaggerated, but we would see, the foot here and the knee pretty far inside. So what I would do is I would either narrow the stance and or bring the toe angle in, and just allow your knees to kind of track where they're going to track. I think it's a really, again, it's a really common thing for lifters to drive their knees out really hard, because for a long time that was a really, really big cue that kind of everybody said, oh, you have to drive your knees out, knees out, knees out, knees out, knees out. But if we watch this, every time you hit the bottom, we're losing a fair bit of stability in the brace, and the knees are coming in at the same time. So if we can keep the knees a little more in, a little more straightforward, and I'm not saying like drive your knees inwards, but try to maintain that the direction the knees are pointing a little bit better, and we're going to be able to maintain our brace a little better, which means we're going to see the hips rise up behind you a little less. We're going to see everything shift forward a little less. And lastly, I would recommend trying to work on keeping that bar really, really tight and locked into your upper back. Because I think the other thing that we're seeing a fair bit of here, and really good job on the first rep, keeping that bar in position. By second rep here, we can see as we come up, right? This is the bar on the way down. As we come up, boop, that bar is rolling out this way, right? We can see that bar start rolling up on your back. And that to me means one of two things. Either we have to work on the bar position and potentially put that bar a little higher or lower so it's a little bit more stable, or we really need to work on ensuring that the upper back and the musculature of the upper back is better locked in, so that we're not loosening in the shoulder blades and the elbows as we change directions in the bottom. And that, my good friends, is Form Check Friday. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you want to come by and have a chance at being selected, make sure you come by our Friday Form Check streams. And other than that, we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.